Today on Queen Me, I am joined by a leader who is redefining what it means to step into power early and who gets to lead in the first place. Sarah Jakle is the founder and executive director of DemocraShe, an organization dedicated to empowering high school girls, especially those who are historically underserved, to step into their leadership, civic engagement, and decision-making roles now, not later. Before launching her organization in 2020, Sarah led national voter engagement efforts, including serving as Get Out the Vote Director for the California National Organization for Women and National Outreach Director for Field Team 6, where she helped pioneer innovative issue-based voter registration strategies. Now, her work is really deeply rooted in policy and people. She has degrees from Yale, USC, and UCLA, and a background in social work supporting individuals facing homelessness and mental illness. She really brings this unique lens, combining compassion, brain science, and leadership development to help young women not just find their voice, but use it. Today, we are going to be talking about youth leadership, civic power, confidence, brain science, and what it really takes to claim your seat before the world tells you you're ready. Take a listen. Thank you so much for joining us. I am just so excited to connect with you and talk with you. You are beyond inspiring.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I am thrilled to be here.
I was thinking a lot about this conversation, how important it is for us to be having this, and especially in the world we're in now. But I want to sort of set the stage a bit because founded your organization in 2020, which we know there was so many things, right? COVID, like all the things in that year. I'm thinking back to all of the things that I experienced in that year. Now, thinking from your journey, what made you realize that this work wasn't something that could wait and really made you start the organization?
Yeah, so the key part of that is that I started democracy at the very end of 2020 because I was working on the presidential election through the House of Representatives in 2018 and then the presidential election in 2020. And I was serving as the Get Out the Vote director of the California National Organization for Women. And that is where I ran up against not only do we not have anything near equal representation. So Congress is currently 28% women. We make up 51% of the population. And Congress is 11% women of color who make up 20% of the population. So we are wildly underrepresented. But we can't just tell women to run or hope women run because there are some structural barriers that get in the way that I was seeing when I was working in elections. And one is women's ability to see themselves as candidates. So men are socialized into this, right? And their common response is, yes, I was thinking governor. Women say, it's not my turn, it's not my time. They are half as likely with the same resume to be able to see themselves running for office. So that was one side of the problem. But the other side was what happened to women when they did step up and run. And you've seen this, Ashley, your listeners have seen it. Women candidates get up to 10 times more bullying and harassment than male candidates. And that's not even counting the thousand cuts of who's watching your kids? Why does your hair look like that? You're very aggressive. So when I was looking at all this, I knew if we want to change this, we need to not only equip women with the talent and abilities to be effective advocates, right? The public policy skills, but the social work skills, the psychology skills to step out of your comfort zone, go for your authentic ambition, to protect your inner life and nervous system when people are pushing back on you so you do not get triggered into responses. You own your responses. And to do that exactly where we lose our girls, which is high school. High school is the last time boys and girls think they can run for office equally. So, Desmond Tutu said something really profound among his, he said millions of profound things. But the one that really stuck with me was we can't just keep picking logs out of the river. We have to stop them from falling in. And if we want to flood our future with women who say yes to these types of opportunities and protect themselves to stay grounded and happy while they're in them. We have to combine both public policy and social work and do it young.
Absolutely. I'm thinking back to, so back in 2018, I remember I ran for Pittsburgh Board of Education. And
Amazing.
right? And it was so cool and empowering and I loved it, but at the same time it was like I experienced exactly what you described. My mind went to like I want to do this, I can do this, and then when I was in it, I was like the things that I faced, what people would say, like all of that, right? Compared to the people that were actually also running that were men, right? That weren't experiencing that same thing. So that is a huge impact, and that's why I love the work that you're doing. Because you're talking about this, right? And it wasn't something at the time that I was like, how do I bring this up, right? Like we're experiencing it, but you're already going through all those things. Like, how do you bring it up? What's next? Um, and that's why I love your career and your background too, because your early career, right, was on mental health and homelessness.
Yes, it
So
was.
can you talk about how that maybe shaped some of this in your leadership and how you view power today?
100%. So I came in through direct service, working with our homeless community dealing with mental illness. And I got a master's in public policy to fight for them because what I started to see was the one at a time work, which I was so passionate about. We needed to do real systemic change on how we address homelessness and how we helped people facing homelessness, especially with mental illness. However, I so loved the people I was working with that I went back after my MPP and ended up getting a master's in social work because they were letting me have conversations that I don't think I should have been having. So like, I wanted to get trained. And when I went in, I went to USC, who had one of the only military social work programs in the country. And I was fascinated by military social work because they were studying trauma. And at the time, the military was one of the only groups that was really looking at trauma. And I knew there was tons of trauma in the homeless community, especially dealing with mental illness. And I wanted to understand brain and nervous system regulation. How have people dealt with extreme adversity that causes fight, flight, freeze responses? How do we communicate with that part of the brain and make it our ally? And so it was coming up through that work that I got interested in how do we protect our nervous systems, which became the foundation of the work of DemocraShe, because women's nervous systems get triggered all the time. And then you have to look at the intersectional spectrum as homophobia gets put in and racism gets put in, and the nervous system gets triggered even more. And when, our fight, flight, freeze response gets triggered, it makes us cautious and avoidant. Totally normal, right? Of course, if your brain is tracking that there are threats, we get cautious and avoidant. And the other thing that we get when we go into fight, flight, freeze is we go into hyper arousal, where we get stuck in worrying, or hypo arousal, where we kind of collapse. And so many women that I was seeing, brilliant, accomplished, amazing women in their 40s and 50s, were starting to collapse. And I started to hear, I'm burning out, I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed, because they had been pushing through the nervous system rather than trying to regulate it. And so, if we want women to not only succeed, but be happy, then training women to regulate nervous systems is part of power, is part of how we acquire, use, and sustain in power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now those I'm so fascinated by this. So those things that you learned, those teachings, right? You then pivoted into working at the national level and like in voter engagement. So what was that journey like? Like how did you go from being in that space to then pivoting into to politics?
So I actually had quite the journey because in 2014, I was diagnosed with a brutal autoimmune disease and told I would never work again
Oh my
by a
God.
very kind rheumatologist, right? Who was like, it's not fair, it's the nature of the illness. And I had seen myself in a career in social work. And instead, I was sitting on a couch. And it was catastrophic, right? It was a catastrophic loss. But I am stubborn and I am academic. And I thought I may not be able to control pain or fatigue or any of that, but I want to learn how to control who I am in this moment and how I can show up. So I really immersed myself in the brain, in all the different modalities of dealing with adversity, of moving through them, and developed these kinds of brain hacks, like having an inner best friend. I created an inner best friend, and my first inner best friend was Barack Obama, who was very encouraging, and my puppy dog Max. I grounded, and for me, I grounded with our Mother Earth, who's always beneath your feet, and you never have to ask, and that pulls you back into your body out of the fight, flight, freeze. I savored. That's from positive psychology, where you ask your brain to notice things that are beautiful or joyful, because our brain has a negativity bias that comes from our evolutionary brain. But you can train it to start picking up on things that are beautiful and joyful, and then it starts doing it on its own. And I did all of that just to see if I could be the Sarah that I wanted to be at that moment. And then the election of 2016 happened. And I said, Ashley, I am not sitting this out. They're coming for people and a country that I love, and I am getting up. But I did have overwhelming pain and fatigue. So I used these brain hacks that I had developed, grounding, checking in with my inner best friend, breaking it down. So it was like, just get in the car and then you can get out. Just register one voter and then you can stop. And I used these over and over so many times that I actually became a national outreach director for voter registration, registering like hundreds of thousands of voters. And I became the Get Out the Vote director, right, for the California National Organization for Women. So when I stepped into those spaces and saw what women were going through, I had actually battle tested the same skills that we teach the DemocraShe girls, which is to ground, which is to reach for their inner best friend, which is to savor and have gratitude and say, thank you, brain. I appreciate that you're chiming in with anxiety, but I'm going to go over here toward my authentic ambition. And the DemocraShe girls learn how our brain evolved, what fight, flight, freeze is, how to recognize it, how to ground in it, that it's a normal part of the brain. It's very helpful, right? But sometimes it's running off of old scripts of what the old brain considered dangerous. And we authentically want to go toward it. So, how do we say yes? So it was in that moment coming out of the 2020 election that I realized my life had uniquely led me to this point of combining the master's in public policy and the master's in social work and the lived experience with a dysregulated nervous system to help women step into their authentic yes.
Mm, I love it. I love it. And you've taken that and helped build so many young women, and you talk about helping them claim their seat, right? And I love this because so often it's like we feel we are left off of the table, right? And when it comes to that moment where maybe you can take the seat, there's that hesitation. So what does it look like in practice when you're saying young women need to claim their seat? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to shift our concepts around running for office. And the DemocraShe girls learn running for office is your birthright. It is your birthright. And our country's promise is predicated on America reflecting all of its people. And the lived experience that you have is uniquely you. Nobody else has it. It is your superpower. And imagine what America would look like if all of the different lived experiences that make up this country were reflected in its laws. Because we're intervening in high school, I want that girl to know Because if she thinks she can be a senator, she knows she can be a CEO. I want her to know that the highest echelons of government are not only her birthright, but we will be so much better when she's there. And she is surrounded by a group of young women that are driven and ambitious who also have lived experiences that should be reflected in our government. And when we do DemocraShe Congress, we get a chance to propose and co sponsor and pass bills based on all these lived experiences and get a chance to see the thought experiment of what Congress would look like if these were the types of laws we were debating and proposing and passing. So I think it's a shift. We talk a lot in DemocraShe about how you can't do it wrong because no matter what you learn, and sometimes it's through something that looks like a mistake that a door opens or a piece of learning opens or something catapults us forward. And for young women who are socialized into perfectionism, to really take in, you can't do it wrong. However, this translates through your radiant self is exactly how it was meant to go, is part of learning that leadership of our country in every room is their right. It is not something they have to ask permission for, it is their right.
Mm, mm. And that's something that I wish that I had when I was in high school or had learned about, right? Like those moments of how would have that, changed me, shaped me, feel empowered in every room that I go into. You've built a network of thousands of young, engaged women. Are there any stories of impact, or are there anything that you want to share about maybe powerful transformations you've noticed, whether within yourself or some of the young women that you're impacting?
Yeah, and I have two versions of this because there's the kind of fancy transformations, right? So Grayson, who used her democracy skills to launch the first youth reproductive rights conference in Chicago, and she ran it for 2 years before she graduated. And the second year, 55 girls wrote her after the conference that they were
Wow.
inspired by her conference to do something in their own school.
Mm.
We have Amanda, who was in the very first cohort of DemocraShe, who came up and realized she's really passionate about the displaced and lost people in like Colombia and Venezuela, the disappeared people. And she wanted to apply for an Obama fellowship. And her imposter syndrome kicked in, right? There's so many people that go for this. You'll never get it. Your project isn't interesting enough. But she had the DemocraShe skill of her inner best friend. And she wrote me that she leaned on that inner best friend who said, why not you? You're special. You're amazing. Go for it. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so she turned it in and she's an Obama fellow.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
It's inflection moments like that, right? Or Hafsa, who ran for a student school board seat in Maryland. And she used her democracy skills, her public speaking skills, her inner best friend and grounding to get through it. And she won and became the youngest elected official in Maryland. But Ashley, women's journeys don't end with the title. So Hafsa went on to serve on that school board with school board members who were very dismissive of such a young person. And it drained all the excitement out of her. But she used the democracy skill of savoring and asked her brain to notice all the small wins that she could see as she moved through to build herself up and keep her momentum. And she ended up passing mental health counselors for her constituents, which was her dream when she ran, and she accomplished it. And I'm so proud of her. I also want to shout out one of our girls, and I don't know which one because we do pre post tests that are anonymous. So girls feel that they can be authentic and honest. And we ask our DemocraShe graduates if DemocraShe has helped you do something that you were too scared to do before. And 96% say yes. Many of them ran for office at their schools, right? Started youth civic engagement nonprofits, like do all these things. One girl, Ashley, wrote, LOL, this is low key so simple, but I stood up for myself at Starbucks. And I was like, you have my attention.
That, oh my gosh.
She said that she ordered a drink and they asked her if she wanted vanilla and she didn't know it cost extra. And then when she got it, they charged her for the vanilla. And many of our students are low income, and this is, a big deal. And she said before DemocraShe, she would have been too scared to say anything. But she grounded with her Mother Earth. She reached for her inner best friend and she stood up for herself and said, actually, you were not clear that this would cost money and I would like to remake it without it. And she was so proud of herself. And, I am as proud of this girl because she's going to start standing up for herself in relationships, at school, when
Mm.
comes to a promotion. It's learning the skill, ground, reach for inner best friend, and advocate for yourself. Your voice matters. So I am as proud of the girl who stood up for herself at Starbucks as the one who became the youngest elected official in Maryland.
Oh my gosh. That's that. I love that so much because those are the moments where just everyday life, right? I might have a drink order wrong. Like, I'm not going to go tell them that it needs to be fixed, or somebody might say something. I'm like, I don't want to rock the boat. I'm not going to say anything. And then you have those moments where you reflect and you're like, yes, I am going to say something. I feel empowered to do that. I love that so much. And that's all really grounded in these brain shifts that you're teaching. So if maybe I wanted to start this practice, is there any like one mind shift that I can maybe use today to help me show up as a leader? Or is there anything that you'd maybe recommend if I want to start to think about like, how do I learn about these impactful tools or start these brain shifts?
Absolutely. So I will say two things. One is I have a Substack where I talk about all these called Brain Hacks for Hope. So definitely if you follow that, I talk about all of these. But just to quickly do it. So Ashley, we are all aware of our inner critic. She pops in, she says you can't do it, it won't work. She's just trying to help. So evolutionarily, it was helpful for your brain to anticipate all the things that could go wrong because that kept you alive. So back in cave person days, ruminating over all the terrible things that could go wrong was very helpful. In 2026, it is not as helpful. But it's very hard to argue with the inner critic because she's the part of the brain that's a survival part of the brain. She's not going to be talked out of her worries. She's trying to keep you alive. However, if you hack an ally whose voice you can hear, and that's our inner best friend, you get to say, thank you, inner critic. I appreciate you're a survival part of the brain and you're trying to keep me alive by filling my head with terrible things. Thank you for trying to keep me alive. And I'm going to ask what my inner best friend would say. And the inner best friend can be someone real in your life that's supportive and loving and has your back. It can be a fictional character or an influencer or an artist. For a lot of girls, it's Taylor Swift or Michelle Obama, right? And so I feel like asking that, and I would ask you, Ashley, who could be your inner best friend?
Oh, I love that. I love that. Somebody that's brought me a lot of joy this past year has been Kamala Harris. So she'd be mine.
I love it. So when you're doubting yourself,
Hmm.
when you're nervous, you're asking yourself to be brave and step out of your comfort zone. Your question is, what would Kamala Harris say right now?
Mm.
What would Kamala Harris say to me? What would my inner best friend say who's
I
Kamala
love
Harris?
this. Mm.
And those words are encouraging, supportive, they have your back. She is someone that inspires you, and you get to gently shift from the inner critic who thinks they're helping, but who says all the terrible things. And it's something you can easily remember to do. What would my
Mm.
inner best friend say? Thank you. What would my inner best friend say? And you can have as many inner best friends as you would like.
Oh, I love that. And that's something that every day, I feel like if I've practiced that, just the slightest decisions, maybe things I would do differently. Like I'd send an email to somebody that I'd really want to connect with, or I'd make that phone call, right? Sometimes when I worked early on in politics, like when instead of it was texting or door to door, it was making all the phone calls, right? And it's like that moment you're like, oh, this person doesn't want to hear from me. I'm feeling just not good. And then you call them and they'd be excited to talk with you, or they'd ask questions, right? It's that simple shift, but it's a big shift. I absolutely love that. That's incredible.
And you're identifying something really important
Mhm.
because I think democracy is about inflection moments.
Mm,
When you're in a moment and you could either talk yourself out of it or you could go toward it. And it is how can you help yourself in those moments when you're hesitating, move toward your authentic ambition or move away, right? Because you're identifying something as toxic. But how can you navigate inflection moments to get to
mm,
yes if it's your authentic yes? Because exactly like you were saying, Ashley, when you do it, you realize, like, oh, they did want to hear from me. Oh, they asked me questions. But you can't have that corrective experience if you can't get yourself to pick up the phone. And
mm,
so often these days, everything feels so overwhelming that it just feels easier to go to TikTok or Instagram and look at algorithms, right? And in the short term, that does feel better. But in the long term, we want to stand up for our values, but we have to move through discomfort to do that. And that's very real. So these tools are all to help navigate discomfort to get to a yes where you can see that you can do
mm,
it. And then that wires that in your brain. So you're more likely to do it again.
mm. And one of the things that I really love about you and everything that you've built is the power of intergenerational diversity, the power of youth empowerment, the power of when we listen and hear and engage with young people, that has a huge impact. And you talk a lot about in your work the importance of trusting young people with actual responsibility, not just, oh, maybe here's this or, small thing, but real responsibility. For people that, and I even experienced this today on a call, somebody was saying things about, young people are not, they said, I don't really trust them leading this. They don't have it, like all of these things, right? What happens when we actually do give young people and trust young people with real responsibility? What happens?
I am very passionate about trusting young people. When I started DemocraShe at the end of 2020, the only decision I made alone was not to do it alone and to build it with high school and college girls because you can't build a program for young women without young women. But those young women had incredible authority on the team. So we decided on the name and the logo and our community agreements. We wrote the whole curriculum together. They were the first peer leaders. I think what I have seen over and over is that if you not just give young people opportunities to lead, because in DemocraShe, you go through our program and you come back and lead it, but you have to set them up for success. They will rise to the occasion if they feel like they have the tools to do it. We don't ask girls to just come in the door and start leading workshops. They go through the DemocraShe and learn how to check in with their inner best friend and ground when they get nervous. They learn public speaking. They practice calling their representative. So they've tried all those things. And then we say, you can now teach this to other people. And I think of doctors where I used to hear it was like watch one, do one, teach one. And I think it's similar with young people. You can very quickly, if you let them watch one, learn one, you can very quickly move to do one, and then even quicker move to teach one. Because young people are amazing, amazing. Um, but they also know when they're not being trusted. They're very attuned to if someone's being authentic or not with thinking that they're capable of what they're doing. So I think believing in young people, training young people, and letting young people have the chance to rise to the occasion is kind of the trifecta.
Mm. That's one of the reasons I think I've been so captivated by you and your work is because as somebody who was in that space where as a young leader wasn't trusted or had seen that, I played chess competitively, wanted to start to teach, there was this feeling of why is a young person teaching, right? How do they have the credentials? Why are they teaching? And what I found was most young people learn even better, especially with chess, when they're taught by somebody their age and that they can engage with, right? And even I feel like as a whole, we're getting better with that. But there are still so many groups. I'm based in Pittsburgh, so many groups, especially foundations here, that don't want to risk that, right? They don't want to give to an org that's saying, "Oh, young people teaching other young people." It's the empowerment, it's the mentorship, it's a connection. And that's why I love what you're doing and you're leading and building because it's like, young people are at the center of this, right? And that to me is so powerful. But there are still so many naysayers that are like, I don't trust this young person. I don't want to see them lead. And you're actively showing that this is what happens when we can lead. And that's really powerful.
I would also argue that there's a tremendous amount of research
Yes.
in the teen years. The way that they are in the developmental stage that they're in is uniquely a peer stage. It is not an adult stage. So when a high school girl is teaching a high school girl, she is 100% not only being mentored, not only does she see who she could be immediately, but she hears it on a much more profound level than just an adult trying to teach it. So I think, understanding that we need to meet people where they are. And in high school, that means meeting them with peers, inspiring, inspiring peers. And I do think there's a if the foundations are not excited about that, there's a lot of research they could read about why they should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, they need to listen to this and hear everything that you're leading and talking about. That would be huge. But I'm just I love this so much, and I want to ask, um, what does it mean to you to unleash your inner queen, especially when it comes to leadership, confidence, stepping into your own role?
I think it is embracing the humanity of leadership. Human beings are messy, glorious, imperfect people. And I think for me in leadership, it is recognizing that I too am a recovering perfectionist. And part of these skills that I learned when I was told I would never work again are based in the self compassion work of Dr. Kristen Neff. And meeting yourself with compassion can feel like woo woo or not, but there's so much research again that if you talk to yourself compassionately or relate to yourself compassionately, you are actually much more likely to achieve your goals and you are much more likely to take social justice action. And I think my leadership has developed to wanting to not only embrace my own messy, imperfect humanity with compassion, but teach other women to do the same. And that every human being is worthy of love and being seen, heard, and valued. And ultimately, if we want public policy that reflects seeing, hearing, and valuing everyone for exactly who they are, we have to internalize that as leaders and internalize that as future public servants, or you can't make that public policy. So I think that's my queen me moment is when I can be compassionate and try to share that with others.
Mm. I love it. I love it. This has been so powerful and so inspiring. If there are young women that are listening that want to engage with you, learn from you, or be a part of the programs, what's a good way for them to start?
Yeah. So we have three options. We have a 10-week program that's 2 hours a week. We have a 1 day summer intensive, and we have a self directed program on our website. All of our programs are online because we are national in scope. So we want girls from different states to be talking to each other. And right now we're in 42 states. So every one of these rooms is filled with girls who not only have the lived experience of their own background, but the lived experience of where they were brought up. And if we are to be a republic, we have to be able to talk across states and understand what women are going through all around the country. So any girl who is interested in democracy can join from her computer or phone. And the last thing I would say is we do pay our students. So for the 10-week program and the 1 week program, we do pay a stipend because we understand that not everyone can do unpaid internships. And I keep saying I want America to reflect all of her people, but it's something I'm deeply passionate about. And if we are to see that, we have to remove barriers to entry in early political pipelines, which tend to be unpaid internships. So we believe in women, we invest in women, we want women to know their time has worth and value, and we want young women who would have to work to be able to join us and make their voices heard in our democracy. So if you go to our website, which is democrashe.org, we have an apply button where you can find all these opportunities.
Amazing. And we'll include all of the links and everything in the descriptions and make sure people engage. And also to your information on the brain science and how we can engage in those tips and topics daily. Um, Thank you so much for all that you do and all that you do to just empower so many young women. And even in this conversation, empowering me, thinking about how I can show up for myself and show up as a leader. It's really, really powerful. You're building such an amazing pipeline of young women who are ready to lead, to decide, who are shaping this future in real time. And I've really learned from you, and so many have learned from you that, you don't need permission to begin. You can claim your seat and you can run with it. So thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you, Ashley, for creating this space.
Thank you. And as always, subscribe, share, and leave a review. Every time you do, you help another leader step into their power and unleash their inner queen. Thank you.